Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. O Radhe, Radhe, Govinda, Govinda, Radhe, 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 Govinda, Govinda, Radhe. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki Jai. Kali Yuga Dharma Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Welcome back, my soul family. So good to see all of you again. Glad to be with you. Today starts a brand new series, brand new month, brand new session. New adventures that we get to go on, stories that we have not yet covered. And this month is extremely important and vital. And today's session, kicking off this month of new series of discussions, realizations that we'll share with one another, is also extremely vital. And I'll tell you why right after we sing Jaya Radha Madhava. So first, we are going to bring our minds and our hearts into this wonderful, beautiful spiritual atmosphere. We are going to invoke the divine abode of Sri Vrindavan Dham, wherever you are. at whatever time of day you find yourself. So whether you are in the middle of the day, whether you are just waking up, or whether you are getting ready to lay down and go to bed, this is a time when we can gather together, gain strength from one another, and pray a little bit, and find out about the adventures of our dearmost friend, Govinda Dev. So of course we'll sing Jaya Radha Madhava together and bring this spiritual atmosphere right in between all of us. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda Shri Radha Madhava ki Jai Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So, I hope you're ready. I hope that we all find ourselves enthusiastic and eager to go on this journey. I hope that it is something, and I hope this session is something that's able to help you, that is able to give some solace and peace to your mind, and maybe something that is able to give you a perspective that maybe you haven't thought of before. So this session is called Even God Freaks Out. So we'll be talking about the very many ways that there are freakouts, and the very many ways that there are freakouts in our lives. And what happens with those freakouts? What do we do with those freakouts? We have all freaked out. We have all broken down. We've all had situations and circumstances where we have felt unsure. So we'll talk about what happens with all of those, how those pertain to our lives, and how those can actually help us. And what does God have to do with all of that? So I'm really excited. I know I have read this piece before, but I'm going to read it again, just to kick off this Gita Jayanti month, this Bhagavad Gita exploration month, this Mahabharata exploration journey and series that will be going on. It is called Courage in Confession. And this is a piece that really aptly describes what happens with all of these freakouts that sometimes occur in our lives. So, of course, we must have our background music. We can't do anything without that. So once again, this piece is called Courage in Confession. And this is a piece that I have adapted from the great Mahabharata and from the Bhagavad Gita, weaving the two together and trying to bring this narrative to you. So we'll start with this. The Gandiva clattered to the floor of the chariot, lifeless and devoid of all potency. Arjuna's fingers cramped from the intense grip he had on his bow. It had been slipping from his hands for several moments. He tightened his hold on the grip in the middle of the bow, but eventually lost out, and the bow, which seemed to have a mind of its own, fell from his hands. Arjuna and his Gandiva were like one entity, nearly inseparable, but now they were at odds. When Arjuna looked at his Gandiva, all he could see was what he was being forced to do. All he could see was the one thing that he could not do. He looked up and peered across the clear and open battlefield. On the opposing side were all of his relatives in one way or another. Arjuna bowed his head under the weight of his coming actions. How could he fight them? And if he fought them, at least some of them would be slain. He knew this for certain. For the first time in his life, he cursed his own knowledge of weaponry and warfare. What good was it now, used on all those whom he loved? Love, what did the word even mean? Arjuna was sure that he no longer knew. If he loved his family, if he loved his teachers, if he had any love for those who had taught him everything he knew about life, could he now look at them with cold eyes, filled with nothing but duty, and kill them all? No, it wasn't possible. This war was not possible. His task was impossible. He wouldn't do it. It was as simple as that. His stomach lurched and he was sure he would be sick. His legs shook. His hands shook. And he sobbed as fresh, hot tears of dread and despair made their way down his cheeks. It seemed a simple conclusion that he would not do battle. Even his body refused to cooperate. Giving in to the demands of his limbs, Arjuna's knees buckled and he sat heavily upon the upholstered seat within the chariot, rocking the carrier's frame. He swallowed, but his throat constricted. It felt so tight that not even air could get through, and he clasped at his throat, clawing with his hands as he tried to gasp, but feeling as though he was sucking in air through a narrow straw. His breaths came quicker and quicker, while sweat broke out across his brow. This was impossible. He was one of the best warriors of his time, and now he would go down in history as a monster. Men would be left lifeless. Women and children would be left without the heads of their families. The loves of their lives would be ripped from them, and they would all look to him as the cause. They would blame him, and Arjuna would blame himself. His head held in his hands, feeling the full weight of the crown on his head, a crown which came at a terrible price. He spoke in a quiet, sorrowful voice. "O Govinda, I shall not fight." These are famous words from the Bhagavad Gita. And it is at this pivotal moment, this one moment of Arjuna's confusion, that has always made a deep impression on me. The great archer Arjuna is having an unimaginable crisis. He has to fight not against simple evildoers, but his own family, his loved ones, his teachers. He is one of the most courageous and well-known characters of this epic history, the Mahabharata, the very epic that we will be embarking on this month. Yet, just before the great battle which would determine the fate of his entire family, he finds that he has lost all courage. He has lost all of his inner fight and fortitude. He has lost his grip on everything that makes him a warrior. I cannot tell you how many times I have felt a similar debilitating feeling. I say similar because my troubles cannot be measured on the same scale or magnitude as Arjuna's terrible decision. But the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita is that it is meant to relate to all of us. We are meant to understand that Arjuna's struggle is a similar struggle that we all face countless times throughout our lives. But the formula for addressing the dilemma remains the same. Arjuna looked into the gorgeously handsome face of his chariot driver Sri Krishna, his best friend, his maternal cousin, his greatest ally, and his everything. In the moment of greatest fear and despair, Arjuna chooses to turn to Krishna and express all of his feelings. He holds nothing back as he speaks with his best friend. He has the courage to confess that he is losing his entire composure. He's losing his mind. He has no idea where to turn. He has no idea what to do. He is crying, shaking down, breaking down emotionally. mentally, physically, and spiritually. But his faith in his dearmost friend gives him the ultimate courage to say, Krishna, I have nothing and no one but you. Although this fear is making me lose sight of who I am, I surrender. I trust you. I trust that whatever you tell me will be good for me. I'm ready now to do as you say. And in that moment of trust, faith, surrender, and love, Krishna doesn't turn from him telling him to man up and get on with it. He explains the workings of the universe with love and gentle compassion to his friend. He comforts Arjuna as no one else in the universe can. There are several times within Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, in essence, I will reveal the secrets of the universe and how to overcome your sorrow, because I love you, and you are my dearmost friend. Krishna explains to the person that he loves that there is nothing in this creation which exists outside of him. Everything is acting under his direction. Surrender to him gives one the greatest happiness and immediate relief. In this regard, for many years, I have looked at the Bhagavad Gita as a treatise on love between the best of friends. Krishna gives Arjuna the motivational speech of all time. It's like, welcome to my TED Talk. First TED Talk ever. And he reveals to him the key to love, life, and surrender. All because Krishna loved Arjuna. And because Arjuna, in a moment of calamity, had the ultimate courage to ask for help. In moments of confusion and depression, I often look at the Bhagavad Gita as a beautiful example of what can happen when we have the courage to ask for help. When we have the courage to surrender to the Supreme Friend who always has our best interests at heart and says without doubt that he will always guide us. Because our divine friend loves us all more than we can imagine. The seers, knowing me as the support, companion, confidant, and sympathizer of all beings, attain peace and relief from the unrelenting desert of material struggle and strife. That was adapted from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text 29. O Govinda, I cultivate the courage to ask for help from my divine guides and mentors, my spiritual teachers, and my dearmost friends. I yearn to have faith in the process of surrender, knowing for certain that it will lead to the greatest peace and the ultimate happiness. And it is for this very reason that there is a piece within my book Premamala which speaks about the Lord driving our chariot. Drive my chariot. Rescue me from myself. And I've said time and time again, let love drive your chariot. It worked for Arjuna. It must work for us. Let love drive your chariot. No longer letting fear guide our lives, governing who we are, what we think at every moment. Our constant fears will try to take the rein and say, no, I'm in control. But no, we have Krishna, the abode and embodiment of all love. Love with a capital L. So when I say, let love drive, really, I'm referring to Krishna, our dearest beloved, the very heart of our hearts, and our dearmost friend. From the time that I was born, I heard, Krishna is your dearmost friend. Krishna is your dearmost friend. But what does that mean? It means that in the moments when we freak out, as Arjuna freaked out, he had an actual, that was the textbook definition of a panic attack. Right? Dizzy, sweating, feverish, shaking, unable to think clearly, unable to breathe, heavy weight on the chest, feeling as though you're going to pass out. These are all the textbook symptoms of a panic attack, an anxiety attack. So, as those moments come upon us in our lives, and they will, we have to remember that our finest devotees, pure devotees, have had these same anxiety attacks. What did they do? They turned their faces to their dearmost friend, who constantly says, I am seated within the heart of every living entity, guiding their wanderings. In fact, have we ever had a situation where sometimes we can get so caught up in our daily lives, in the struggles that we face, in the obstacles that we must overcome, that we are unable to see anything else? When we are in those situations, it is so difficult to see that anyone is there for us, looking out for us, offering us any kind of assistance. Who do we turn to when no one else is there? How is it possible to turn to our Supreme Beloved in those moments? When it feels like God is so far beyond reach, and when we so desperately need a tangible hand to hold, how can we depend on love? When sometimes it feels like an abstract idea, how can we depend on the divine, on God, on Krishna, on love? How? Krishna says within Bhagavad Gita, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot. These words stopped me in the middle of a freak-out one day. All of my self-pity drained right out of me completely. All of the fight I had been putting up vanished. And I'll tell you why. I started to understand that I am more than just this body. I am now understanding that I am a soul connected to my Supreme Beloved because I can feel it. Deep in my heart, I feel it as truth. I feel it as certain as I feel that, sure, I hope, and I count on waking up the next day. I can feel that love. So if I know that, then my Divine Lord must be right. This is not the first birth I have ever had. There have been countless births before it. Not only have there been countless births, but that means there have been countless freakouts. There have been countless moments of despair, countless moments of anxiety, and countless moments of depression. Moments that now I don't even remember. But there's someone who does remember. My Supreme Lord. In fact, even within the small span of this one life, there have been so many moments that I thought I would not get through. Those moments passed. The sun rose again, time kept going, and I forgot them. But my Lord has never, ever forgotten. He has not forgotten the moments from this lifetime where He has picked me up, the moments where He has held me, the moments where He has held my hand, the moments where He has guided me through, the moments where He has absolutely lit up my pathway with His own bright effulgence. He has never forgotten. He's not forgotten the moments from this lifetime or any other lifetime, which means He has been with me for all of those lifetimes. Someone has been keeping track. Love has been keeping score, and my beloved has always been by my side. So the next time we feel as though we are alone, and all we can see is our own despair, let's remember that that's just the tunnel vision talking. Our minds will come up with so many schemes to convince us that fear should always win. But don't let the mind, with all of its fears, drive your chariot. Let love drive. It worked out really well for Arjuna. So we feel sometimes, is anybody keeping track? Is anybody keeping the tally score marks of all of the horrible things that I've had to go through in just this one life? And then Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, we've passed so many lives together, but you don't remember them. But I do. I remember all of them. Not only does he remember every life, he remembers every joy, every smile, every happy dance, every tear, every disparaging moment, every moment of crisis, every obstacle we have faced, every time we have called out for him and his mercy, he remembers, and we don't. Can we even count the amount of times in this one lifetime that we've called out for his mercy? We don't even remember how many times we've called out for blessings and miracles and God's love in this one lifetime. But God remembers. He's keeping score. He is keeping track. There is someone who has been with us life after life after life along this journey that our soul has taken through this material existence. He's been keeping track this entire time. Sometimes not only do we forget our circumstances, not only do we forget our despair and our depression, we forget him. We forget ourselves. Who will remind me when I don't remember who I am? God will. Govinda will. And he'll do it with such love and such affection that you wind up thinking, how did I ever live without you? How did I ever live without knowing you? What was my life before coming to these conclusions? So the next time we feel like we want to get angry with Govinda, and we want to think, you've never done anything for me. He's been doing everything, and we don't even remember. Kind of puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? Really opens things up. And on top of that, we have so many promises, so many love-filled messages from Bhagavad Gita. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Do we know what that means? Really? It sounds wonderful in Bhagavad Gita. It sounds elevated, but what does that really mean? Never was there a time when you did not exist. Never was there a time when your soul did not exist. Which means that Krishna, as your companion, was always there constantly. Nor in the future will any of us cease to be, which means that there is nothing that you can do that will chase Krishna away. There is nothing that you will do that will scare him off. He is heroic and valiant. There is nothing, no amount of depression will frighten him off. No amount of our pessimistic attitudes will frighten him away. He stays with us through it all. And the entire time he just encourages us. Look deeper. Look deeper. Look again. I'm here. I'm here. Listen closely. I'm here. Every time we've called out, I'm here. If you just look my way, I'm here. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. There is a point in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, all those who surrender to me, we should know that they are in me, they are of me, and they are mine. There is nothing that we will ever be able to do where Krishna will say, you no longer belong to me. He doesn't work like that. And then he says, you should know of all qualities, both good and bad, success and failure, all of these things, fame and infamy, they all find their origin within me. So then he consoles us. Don't feel bad. You we know There's been so many things that have happened in the course of this life. He doesn't hold them against us. He says, don't worry. It all finds its origin in me anyway. He tries to relate to us. Imagine the divine trying to relate to us. And why? Not because he has to, not because there's some rule that says he must, because of love and affection. Because he loves us more than we could ever imagine loving anyone. This is a love that does not control us. This is a love that does not say you worship me or you die. This is a love that says I will give you chance after chance after chance. And still, when you think you are beyond saving, I'll give you another chance. This is a love that says I will never force you to love me, and if you want to forget me, Krishna says I even give forgetfulness. Who can comprehend a lover like that? Who can comprehend a beloved that says, if you want to forget me, I love you so much, I'll let it happen. I will facilitate it happening. You want to be angry with me? No problem. Go ahead. I'll make it happen. You want to forget me? Forget me. I will become invisible for you. But I hope you don't. Who can comprehend of a love like that? Not me. I'm still selfish. I still think of ways, but how is this going to benefit me? I still think of my spiritual life as a give and take. Oh, my Lord, I'll worship you. But then what do I get? I still am working on being more selfless. Still working on being a servant of divine love because of these points. This Bhagavad Gita where Krishna gives promise after promise after promise. I will stay with you. I'm seated within your heart forever. I've always been seated in your heart. I'm in your heart right now. I'll stay in your heart. Nothing you can say, do, think, feel, or will into existence will ever get me to move from that spot. Absolutely nothing. And so that's not to say we should test that theory and do every terrible thing that we can think of, because material nature also has its laws. And so there are actions and reactions that will happen. But what Krishna wants, what Krishna desires, is for all of us to come to the understanding that he loves us. And that is all there is. That is the basis and foundation of all existence. That love. The love not only between Krishna and his pure devotees, but the love between Krishna and all of us. And then he makes it simple. Always think of me. Become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. This is the culmination of the Gita, which we will get into, of course. How many times do we hear God promising, just think of me. Even if you think you can't do anything else, if you can't follow any rituals, if you can't follow any worship, if you can't, just think of me. Think of me more and more and more. And the more you think of me, I promise I will handle everything personally in your life. I promise you this because I feel so much for you. This is the divine. This is God. But more than that, this is our dearmost friend. This is our beloved. This is the person who is keeping count. Many, many births you and I have taken. I can remember them all, but you cannot. This is the person who has been keeping the record of every single tear, of every disappointment, and is promising over and over again, I'll make it right. I'll make it right. I will. Just call on me. Just ask me. have the courage to ask for help. We can follow Arjuna's grand example. And we can ask for help. So sometimes we think of spiritual strength. Strength, and real spiritual strength, is about more than just toughing it out. At some point in our spiritual journeys, we are going to have to face the fact that it is very likely that we will break down, that we will not have it all together, that we will drop to our hands and knees and press our foreheads to the floor, and we might want to give up. It's okay. It doesn't make us any less spiritual. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It makes us the keeper and the guardian, the steward of a spirit soul. Think about it. If Arjuna had never broken down, if he had not dropped his bow, sunk to his hands and knees and cried out, "I cannot do this," with the shakiest of breaths, we might never have had the great Bhagavad Gita. We might never have had this grand message of love and friendship. So, men break down, women break down, spiritualists, seekers, and devotees all break down. And it is okay. Because those breakdowns pave the way for divine intervention. Those are the moments where miracles, the likes of which the souls of the world might not have been able to survive without, those are the moments that make those miracles. Those breakdowns are like the siren calls that bring mercy. And so are all of you. So I will be the first to say that I do not have it all together. I don't have all the answers. I will most probably break down. But I also know that my real strength is that I am carried through, fortified, uplifted, and reinforced by divine, spiritually enriched, supreme love. And so are you. So when we feel a little lost, it's okay. When we feel as though we don't have it all together, it's okay. Our dearmost friend will help us find our way again. And when that happens, I hope you come back, and I hope you tell all of us about it. We need those testimonies of miracles and of grace. As the record keepers of divine connection, we need these stories. These are the modern day pastimes. So when the Lord answers your prayers and when those miracles happen, come back. Tell us about it. Enrich our lives with these stories that will give us faith and hope. Because it's not the last time that we'll go through difficulty. So of course, I gave such a teaser and I promised we would talk because this session is called Even God Freaks Out. And so far, God has not freaked out. He's been calm, collected, and cool throughout, right? Giving us such nurturing, promising words from Bhagavad Gita. So many things. I am there for you. I've always been there. I am seated within your heart. I will give you everything. He is an abode of endless, unlimited love, showering it forth. I will remember everything. I'll carry you through. I will carry what you lack, preserve what you have. I'll make you perfect even if you're not. Right? We've been getting all of these calm and cool and collected words. But does God ever freak out? What happens when he does? So, we are going to end with a story from Krishna book. A story that I have not read here yet. A story that is very exciting for me. This is Krishna book, one of the latter chapters. My Krishna book is kind of titled differently with different chapters. But this chapter is called The Battle Between Shalva and the Yadu Dynasty. While Shukadeva Goswami was narrating various activities of Lord Krishna and playing the role of an ordinary human being, he also narrated the history of the battle between the dynasty of Yadu and a demon of the name Shalva. So I hope we're all ready. I hope we are listening closely. And I hope that we are eager for this journey. It's going to be exciting. It became a quick favorite of mine. Okay. We even have music change because the mood is about to change a little bit. So, he also narrated the history of the battle between the dynasty of Yadu and a demon of the name Shalva, who had managed to possess a wonderful airship named Sobha. King Shalva was a great friend of Shishupal's. When Shishupal went to marry Rukmini, Shalva was one of the members of the bridegroom's party. And speaking of this marriage between Rukmini and Krishna, we narrated that story in one of our sessions, which can be found on YouTube, as well as Facebook and Instagram. When there was a fight between the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty and the kings of the opposite side, Shalva was defeated by the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. But despite his defeat, he made a promise before all the kings that he would, in the future, rid the world of all the members of the Yadu dynasty. Since his defeat in the fight during the marriage of Rukmini, he had maintained within himself an unforgettable envy of Lord Krishna, and he was in fact a fool, because he had promised to kill Krishna. These are the words of Srila Prabhupada summarizing the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I love the way he does things and the way he phrases things. Usually, such foolish demons take shelter of a demigod like Lord Shiva to execute their ulterior plans. And so Shalva, in order to get strength, took shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. He underwent a severe type of austerity during which he would eat no more than a handful of ashes daily. None of us, we don't even have the fortitude and the determination to do austerity, even like the demons. It's no wonder that we don't have all of our mystical powers. Lord Shiva, the husband of Parvati, is generally very merciful, and he becomes very quickly satisfied if someone undertakes severe austerities in order to please him. So after continued austerities by Shalva for 1 year, Lord Shiva became pleased with him and asked him to beg for the fulfillment of his desire. Shalva begged from Lord Shiva the gift of an airplane which would be so strong that it could not be destroyed by any demigod, demon, human being, Gandharva, Naga, or even by any Rakshasa. Moreover, he desired that the airplane be able to fly anywhere and everywhere he would like to pilot it, and be specifically very dangerous and fearful to the dynasty of the Yadus. Lord Shiva immediately agreed to give him the benediction, and Shalva took the help of the demon, Maya, to manufacture this iron airplane, which was so strong and formidable that no one could crash it. It was a very big machine, almost like a big city, and it could fly so high and at such a great speed that it was almost impossible to see where it was, and so there was no question of even attacking it. Although it might be dark outside, the pilot could fly anywhere and everywhere. Having acquired such a wonderful airplane, Shalva flew it to the city of Dwarka, because his main purpose in obtaining the airplane was to attack the city of the Yadus, toward whom he maintained a continual feeling of animosity. Shalva thus not only attacked the city of Dwarka from the sky, but he also surrounded the city by a large number of infantry. The soldiers on the surface began to attack the beautiful spots of the city. They began to destroy the baths, the city gates, the palaces and the skyscraper houses, the high walls all around the city, and the beautiful spots where the people would gather for recreation. While the soldiers were attacking on the surface, the airplane began to drop big slabs of stone, tree trunks, thunderbolts, poisonous snakes, and many other dangerous things. So we see modern warfare has nothing on Vedic times. Shalva also managed to create such a strong whirlwind within the city that all of Dwarka became dark because of the dust that covered the sky. The airplane occupied by Shalva put the entire city of Dwarka into distress, equal to that caused on the earth long, long ago by the disturbing activities of Tripurasura, who we know that Lord Shiva himself killed. The inhabitants of Dwarkapuri became so harassed that they were not in a peaceful condition for even a moment. Now, everyone in Dwarka is freaking out. The great heroes of Dwarka city, headed by commanders such as Pradyumna, the son of Krishna, counteracted the soldiers and the airplane of Shalva. When he saw the extreme distress of the citizens, Pradyumna immediately arranged his soldiers and personally got upon a chariot, encouraging the citizens by assuring their safety. Following his command, many warriors like Satyaki, who was the cousin of Krishna and commander of his army, Charudeshna and Samba, who were also sons of Krishna, all young brothers of Pradyumna, as well as Akrura, Kritavarma, Bhanuvinda, Gada, Shuka, and Sharana, all came out of the city to fight with Shalva. All of them were great fighters. Each one could fight with thousands of men. All were fully equipped with necessary weapons and assisted by hundreds and thousands of charioteers, elephants, horses, and infantry soldiers. Fierce fighting began between the two parties, exactly as was formerly carried on between the demigods and the demons. The fighting was very severe, and whoever observed the fierce nature of this fight felt his hairs stand on end. Pradyumna immediately counteracted the mystic demonstration occasioned by the airplane of Shalva, the king of Soba. By the mystic power of the airplane, Shalva had created a darkness as dense as night, but Pradyumna all of a sudden appeared like the rising sun. As with the rising of the sun, the darkness of night is immediately dissipated, so with the appearance of Pradyumna, the power exhibited by Shalva became null and void. Each and every one of Pradyumna's arrows had a golden feather at the end, and the shaft was fitted with a sharp iron edge. Such detail. I love the details. By releasing 25 such arrows, Pradyumna severely injured Shalva's commander-in-chief. He then released another 100 arrows toward the body of Shalva. After this, he pierced each and every soldier. By releasing one arrow, and he killed the chariot drivers by firing 10 arrows at each of them. The carriers, like the horses and elephants, were killed by the release of 3 arrows directed toward each of them. When everyone present on the battlefield saw this wonderful feat of Pradyumna, the great fighters on both of the sides began to praise his acts of chivalry. So even the enemy could see how heroic Pradyumna, the son of Sri Krishna, was. But still, the airplane occupied by Shalva was very mysterious. It was so extraordinary that sometimes there would appear to be many airplanes in the sky, and sometimes it would appear that there were none. Sometimes it was visible, and sometimes it was not visible, and the warriors of the Yadu dynasty became puzzled about the whereabouts of this peculiar airplane. Sometimes they would see the airplane on the ground, and sometimes they would see it flying in the sky. Sometimes they would see the airplane resting on the peak of a mountain, and sometimes it was seen floating in the water. The wonderful airplane was flying in the sky like a firefly in the wind. It was not steady even for a moment. But despite the mysterious maneuvering of the airplane, the commanders and the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty would immediately rush towards Shalva wherever he was present with his airplane and soldiers. The arrows released by the dynasty of the Yadus were as bright as the sun and as dangerous as the tongues of serpents. All the soldiers fighting on behalf of Shalva became soon distressed by the incessant release of arrows upon them by the heroes of the Yadu dynasty, and Shalva himself became unconscious from the attack of these arrows. The soldiers and the fighters fighting on behalf of Shalva were also very strong, and the release of their arrows also harassed the heroes of the Yadu dynasty. But still the Yadus were so strong and determined that they did not move from their strategic positions. The heroes of the Yadu dynasty were determined to either die in the battlefield or gain victory. They were confident of the fact that if they died in the fighting, they would attain a heavenly planet, and if they were to come out victorious, they would enjoy the entire world. The name of Shalva's commander-in-chief was named Dyuman. He was very powerful, and although bitten by 25 of Pradyumna's arrows, he suddenly attacked Pradyumna with his fierce club and struck him so strongly that Pradyumna became unconscious. Immediately there was a roaring, "Now he is dead! Now he is dead!" The force of the club on the chest of Pradyumna was very severe, enough to tear asunder the chest of an ordinary man. Pradyumna's chariot was being driven by the son of Daruka, who was Krishna's own charioteer. According to Vedic military principles, the chariot driver and the hero on the chariot have to cooperate during the fighting. As such, it was the duty of the chariot driver to take care of the hero on the chariot during the dangerous and precarious fighting on the battlefield. Thus, the son of Daruka removed the body of Pradyumna from the battlefield. 2 hours later, in a quiet place, Pradyumna regained his consciousness, and when he saw that he was in a place other than the battlefield, he addressed the charioteer and condemned him. "Oh, how have you done the most abominable act? Why have you moved me from the battlefield? My dear charioteer, I have never heard that anyone in our family was ever removed from the battlefield. None of them left the battlefield while fighting. By this removal you have overburdened me with a great defamation. It will be said that I left the battlefield while fighting was going on. My dear charioteer, I must accuse you. You are a coward and emasculator. Tell me, how can I go before my uncle Balaram and before my father Krishna, and what shall I say to them? Everyone will talk about me and say that I have fled from the fighting place. And if they inquire from me about this, what will be my reply? My sisters-in-law will play jokes upon me with sarcastic words. My dear hero, how have you become such a coward? How have you become such a eunuch? How have you become so low in the eyes of the fighters who opposed you? I think, my dear charioteer, that you have committed a great offense by removing me from the battlefield." What a freak-out Pradyumna's having. So it just goes to show that these freak-outs are not only had by pure devotees, by mortals like ourselves, but by divine personalities. This is Krishna's own son, who looked like Krishna, who had heroic valor like Krishna, who had heroism like Krishna, and he is freaking out. The charioteer of Pradyumna replied, "My dear sir, I wish a long life for you. I think I did not do anything wrong, as it is the duty of the charioteer to help the fighter in the chariot when he is in a precarious condition. My dear sir, you are completely competent in the battlefield activities. It is the mutual duty of the charioteer and the warrior to give protection to each other in a precarious condition. I was completely aware of the regulative principles of fighting, and I did my duty. The enemy all of a sudden struck you with his club so severely that you lost consciousness. You were in a dangerous position, surrounded by your enemies. Therefore, I was obliged to act as I did." After talking with his charioteer, the son of Daruka, Pradyumna could understand the real circumstances, and therefore he refreshed himself by washing his mouth and hands. Arming himself properly with bows and arrows, he asked his charioteer to take him near the place where Shalva's commander-in-chief was standing. During the short absence of Pradyumna from the battlefield, Dyuman, Shalva's commander-in-chief, had been taking over the positions of the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. By appearing in the battlefield, Pradyumna immediately stopped him and struck him with 8 arrows. With 4 arrows he killed his 4 horses. With 1 arrow his chariot driver, and with another arrow he cut his bow in 2. With another arrow he cut his flag into pieces, and with another he severed his head from his body. Shri Pradyumna ki Jai. On the other fronts, heroes like Gada, Satyaki, and Samba were engaged in killing the soldiers of Shalva. The soldiers who were staying with Shalva in the airplane were also killed in the fighting, and they fell into the ocean. Each party began to strike the opposite party very severely. The battle was fierce and dangerous, and continued for 27 days without stopping. While the fight was going on in the city of Dwarka, Krishna was staying at Indraprasth along with the Pandavas and King Yudhishthir. This fighting with Shalva took place after the Rajasuya Yajna had been performed by King Yudhishthir and after the killing of Shishupal. So here we have our Mahabharata connection, which we'll get into again later in the month. When Lord Krishna understood that there was a great danger in the city of Dwarka, he took permission from the elderly members of the Pandava family, especially from his aunt Kunti Devi, and started immediately for Dwarka. Now, here comes our hero. Lord Krishna began to think that while he was arriving in Hastinapur with Balaram after the killing of Shishupal, Shishupal's men must have attacked Dwarka. On reaching Dwarka, Lord Krishna saw that the whole city was greatly endangered. He placed Balaramji in a strategic position for the protection of the city, and he himself asked his own charioteer, Daruka, to prepare to start. He said, Daruka, please immediately take me to where Shalva is staying. You may know that this Shalva is very powerful, mysterious. Do not fear him in the least. As soon as he got his orders from Lord Krishna, Daruka had him seated on the chariot and drove very quickly toward Shalva. The chariot of Lord Krishna was marked with the flag bearing the insignia of Garuda. And as soon as the soldiers and warriors of the Yadu dynasty saw the flag, they could understand that Lord Krishna was on the battlefield. By this time, almost all the soldiers of Shalva had been killed. But when Shalva saw that Krishna had come to the battlefield, he released a great, powerful weapon, which flew through the sky with a roaring sound like a great meteor. It was so bright that the whole sky lit up by its presence. But as soon as Lord Krishna appeared, he tore the great weapon into hundreds and thousands of pieces by releasing his own arrow. Holder of the Sharanga bow, Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan ki Jai. Lord Krishna struck Shalva with 16 arrows, and with showers of arrows he overpowered the airplane, just as the sun in a clear sky overpowers the whole sky by an unlimited number of molecules of sunshine. Shalva struck a severe blow to Krishna's left side, where the Lord was carrying his bow, Sharanga, and as a result, the Sharanga bow fell from Lord Krishna's hand. This dropping of the bow was indeed wonderful. Great personalities and demigods who were observing the fight between Shalva and Krishna became most perturbed by this, and they began to exclaim, Alas, alas! What will happen now that our hero has dropped his weapon? Shalva thought that he had become victorious, and with a roaring sound began to address Lord Krishna as follows, You rascal Krishna! You kidnapped Rukmini forcibly even in our presence. You baffled my friend Shishupal and married Rukmini yourself. And in the great assembly at King Yudhishthir's Rajasuya Yagya, while my friend Shishupal was a little absent-minded, you took an opportunity to kill him. Everyone thinks that you are a great fighter and that no one can conquer you. So now, you'll have to prove your strength. I think that if you stand before me any longer, with my sharpened arrows, I shall send you to the place wherefrom you will never return, to the abode of death. To this, Lord Krishna replied, Foolish Shalva, you are talking nonsensically. You do not know that the moment of death is already upon your head. Those who are actually heroes do not talk much. They prove their prowess by practical exhibition of chivalrous activities. Essentially, Lord Krishna is saying, less talk, more action. After saying this, Lord Krishna, in great anger, struck Shalva on the collarbone with his club so severely that Shalva began to bleed internally and tremble as if he were going to collapse from severe cold. Before Krishna was able to strike him again, however, Shalva became invisible by his mystic power. Within a few moments, a mysterious, unknown man came before Lord Krishna. Crying loudly, he bowed down at the Lord's lotus feet and said to him, Since you are the most beloved son of your father Vasudeva, your mother Devaki has sent me to inform you of the unfortunate news that your father has been arrested by Shalva and taken him away by force. He took him just as a butcher mercilessly takes away an animal. When Lord Krishna heard this unfortunate news from the unknown man, he at first became most perturbed, just like an ordinary human being. His face showed signs of grief. and he began to cry in a piteous tone. Oh, how could that happen? My brother Lord Balaram is there, and it is impossible for anyone to conquer Balaramji. He is in charge of Dwarka city, and I know that he is always alert. How could Shalva possibly enter the city and arrest my father in that way? Whatever he may be, Shalva's power is limited. So how could it be possible that he conquered the strength of Balaram and taken away my father? Arresting him is described by this man. Alas, destiny, after all, is very powerful. And so here we have God freaks out. In a moment of extreme circumstances, the Lord himself loses his composure. He's God. Doesn't he know everything? Of course he does. But in the throes of these human-like pastimes, covered over by his own Yogamaya potency, he is lamenting, in anxiety, crying out, saying, alas, all of this coming under time. Time is, no one is exempt. Is no one safe? How is this possible? How could Shalva have completely overpowered my brother? No one can overpower my brother. Krishna is unsure, panic-stricken, and his heart is breaking. No one is exempt from these freakouts. So if you feel like you don't have it all together, if you feel like your composure is waning, don't feel bad. No one is exempt. Everyone has them. It is natural. It makes you the guardian, the steward of a soul. After all, even our dearmost friend, right now, is freaking out, in anxiety, unable to explain what's happening. While Sri Krishna was thinking like this, Shalva brought before him in custody a man exactly resembling Vasudeva, his father. These were all creations of the mystic power of Shalva. Shalva began to address Krishna. You rascal Krishna, look! Look! This is your father who has begotten you, and by whose mercy you are still living. Now, just see how I kill your father. If you have any strength, try to save him. The mystic juggler, Shalva, speaking in this way before Lord Krishna, immediately cut off the head of the false Vasudeva. Without hesitation, he took away the dead body and got into his airplane. Lord Krishna is the self-sufficient Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet, because he was playing the role of a human being, he became extremely depressed for a moment, as if he had actually lost his father. And I just see Krishna crestfallen, thinking of any way to stop this moment. Stop! Just stop anything. Make time stop. Make everything stop to save his father, and yet killed before his very eyes. And he's unable to stop him? Controller of time. He is time itself. And he was unable to stop this from happening. So he lamented for a moment, as if he had actually lost his father. But at the next moment, he could understand that the arrest and killing of his father were demonstrations of the mystic powers which Shalva had learned from the demon Maya. Coming to his right consciousness, he could see that there was no messenger and no head of his father, but that only Shalva had left in his airplane, which was flying in the sky. He then began to think of slaying Shalva. Krishna's reaction is a controversial point among great authorities and saintly persons. How could Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the reservoir of all power and knowledge, be bewildered in such a way? Lamentation, aggrievement, and bewilderment are characteristics of persons who are conditioned souls. But how can such things affect the person of the Supreme, who is full of knowledge, power, and all opulence? Actually, it is not at all possible that Lord Krishna was misled by the mystic jugglery of Shalva. but he was displaying his pastime and playing the role of a human being. Great saintly persons and sages who are engaged in the devotional service of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and who have thus achieved the greatest perfection of self-realization, have transcended the bewilderments of the bodily concept of life. Lord Krishna is their ultimate goal. How then could Krishna have been bewildered by the mystic jugglery of Shalva? The conclusion is that Lord Krishna's bewilderment was another opulence of his supreme personality. So Krishna has this moment to show opulence? This lamentation is an opulence? Of course it is. What is that opulence? This opulence is in the attachments to the people that we hold most dear. It was not just anyone that Shalva brought before Krishna. It was his own father, Vasudeva. The father for whom Krishna left Vrindavan. The father for whom Krishna forsook. He forsook all of his friends and family that he had grown up with. His childhood love. His divine sweetheart. His mother Jashoda. His father Nanda. He left them all to save Vasudeva from Kamsa. And now this very father was being dragged before him by Shalva, spewing hatred. And by his own mystic potencies, he gets caught up in Shalva's jugglery for but a moment. But this is the opulence. We are not alone. Sometimes we think, does God even know what I'm going through? Can God even comprehend the feeling that I get when I have to lose a family member? When I think about the fact that my family members will be torn away from me? Of course. Of course he does. And he's showing us right here, practically. He's showing us dramatically. I know what you're going through. I felt it. I felt that. It was personal. And he laments for his father, who he saw beheaded right in front of him. He had given up everything for Vasudeva. And now he was going to be unable to save him? How would he explain that to anyone else? How would he show his face to anyone else? And so he shows the opulence of his supreme personality. God is a person with characteristics, features, and feelings. So yes, he knows what you're going through. Yes, he feels for you for every tear. Yes, he understands the depression. Yes, he understands the aimless nature of the mind going in circles, turning against itself, telling us we'll never be good enough. We will never be able to react fast enough. We will never be able to save everyone. And that will be the greatest failing of our lives. Yes, he understands. Because he's experienced the same things. And in understanding his devotees, he does not just say, oh, I'll understand. He gives a practical example. He throws himself deep into the pastime to the point where he is confused, where he loses his composure, where he is depressed. Srila Prabhupada uses the word depressed. Yes, God is depressed. So he understands your depression. God is panicked. So he understands your panic. There is nothing that he will not understand. So we must gather that courage to ask for help. Because in the next moment, he remembers who he is. He remembers, wait a second. Who am I? Who is Shalva to me? This one puny demon can't do anything. He realizes none of that was real. Wait a second. But what is so beautiful is his attachment to his parents. His attachment to his family members. He was grieving. Almost losing it on the battlefield. So the attachments that we have for our family members, partners, spouses, children, it's natural and encouraged. These are divine connections. Connections that go deeper than just our bodily designations. These are soul connections that we can make, especially if those connections are based on bettering our spiritual lives and our spiritual mentalities. For those who are favorable of our spiritual journeys, for those who help us in our spiritual lives, Srila Prabhupada says, those attachments are never to be given up. It is already understood that a person who is within a family, who is somehow or other helping them along their spiritual journey, that person has already entered the best of meditative atmospheres. So where sages would go to the forest and do deep meditation, we may not be able to do that now, but that is unnecessary. Where we are in the company of like-minded, spiritually minded people who can help us on our spiritual paths, we are already in the perfect place to do our meditation. And so Krishna is attached to his father. He doesn't think on seeing the death of his father, oh, that was just a material body, got to get free from that. No. He's lamenting. For a moment, he's too distressed to even do anything. And then he remembers who he is. He remembers who he is. So, one of our friends is asking, is it justifiable then to be depressed over the loss of a loved one forever? The level of the depression should ease. We remember their loss always, as we do with all other Vaishnavas. Every year we celebrate the days that Vaishnavas have appeared and the days that our spiritual mentors have left. All over Vaishnav, Sanatan Dharma, Hindu calendars, you see so many dates. This person's appearance day, that person's disappearance day. So we never forget. Don't ever forget. We have songs from spiritual guides and mentors, spiritual teachers saying, in the absence of all of my spiritual people, I will bash my head against the rock. I feel like entering into fire because I am bereft of their association. I miss them so much. But what is also the example? The example is that it did not stop these acharyas, these teachers, from pursuing their spiritual lives, from continuing on to create poems and works of writing, works of art, works of drama, from doing their devotional service. So while we can remember, while we may forever feel as though I miss these people, I miss being separated from them, while that is natural and completely in line with our spiritual teachings, right? We see it across all of our spiritual teachers. It is completely in line with what we call our parampara, our traditions. We have to remember to not let it stop us and hold us back from serving at our highest capacity. Because those people that we have lost, if they have helped us on our spiritual journey, the one thing they would want is for us to perform our service, whatever that may be, to the highest of our capacity. So we use that as fuel to honor them. We honor them by doing our service and doing it well. We never forget them. That corner of lamentation will always be in the heart. It might never leave. And we might forever be journaling about it. So yes, journal about it. Write it down. Speak to them. Remember them. Honor them. But do your service. Do you. Serve to your highest capacity. Because those who are our real well-wishers would always want that. So Krishna is showing that there is attachment. It's natural. It's part of his supreme personality. And these attachments to those spiritually minded people don't have to be given up or forsaken. They are to be honored and worshipped even in some cases. We see this so many times, the way Krishna honors and worships his friends, the way Krishna honors and worships his parents, the way he even spoils his wives. He was so personable in all of those relationships. In a way, he is such a god of relationships, having so many relationships with so many different people. So we see we don't have to forsake them. We don't have to forsake our relationships or the people in our lives or all of these things. We simply add Krishna. Like just add magic. Put Krishna in the center of it. And the lotus that will form around that relationship will be the thing that spreads the fragrance of spiritual and divine unity throughout our lives. We're always looking for that divine union, that spiritual union, that union that satisfies the soul. Well, it has to be like a double strand of DNA, but not just woven around itself, but woven around the common thread of Krishna. If we can do that, which is the real challenge, if we can do that, if we can wind our lives around Krishna and wind our relationships around that supreme relationship with Krishna, we start to look at each other differently. We start to interact with each other differently, better, more conscious, more mindful, more heartfelt. So let's see what happens at the end of this story. When Shalva thought that Krishna had been bewildered by his mystic representations, he became encouraged and began to attack the Lord with greater strength and energy by showering volumes of arrows upon him. But the enthusiasm of Shalva can be compared to the speedy march of flies into a fire. Lord Krishna, by hurling his arrows with unfathomable strength, injured Shalva, whose armor, bow, and jeweled helmet all scattered into pieces. With a crashing blow from Krishna's club, Shalva's wonderful airplane burst into pieces and fell into the sea. Shalva was very careful, and instead of crashing with the airplane, he managed to jump onto the land. He again rushed towards Lord Krishna. When Shalva ran swiftly to attack Krishna with his club, Lord Krishna cut off his hand, which fell to the ground with the club. Finally, deciding to kill him, the Lord took up his wonderful disc, his Sudarshan Chakra, which was shining like the brilliant sun at the time of the dissolution of the material creation. When Lord Krishna stood up with his disc to kill Shalva, he appeared just like the red sun rising over a mountain. Lord Krishna then cut off his head, and with his head, with its earrings and helmet, it fell onto the ground. Shalva was thus killed in the same way as Vritrashura was killed by Indra, the king of heaven. Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan Ki Jai. When Shalva was killed, all his soldiers and followers began to cry, "Alas, alas!" While Shalva's men were thus crying, the demigods from the heavenly planets showered flowers on Krishna and announced the victory by beating on drums and blowing bugles. And that is how Shri Krishna killed the great mystic Shalva, who had even him confused for just a moment by his own sweet will. So even God freaks out. So he understands what you're going through. All there is for us to open our hearts and tell him. Have the courage to confess your heart and ask for help. Like Arjuna, like countless times before, he will always swoop in to save the day. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but he will always come to save the day. Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you all for being with me to kick off this new series. We'll be getting further into Mahabharata in the coming days. Our next session is on Friday, which will be Saturday morning for some of you, but Friday. I look forward to it. I can't wait to be with all of you again. I'm so glad that you were here. I'm so glad all of you stayed. The session was longer than an hour, but we were able to dive in, dive deep, and hopefully console each other. I hope that we leave this session with hearts fuller and more ready to fall in love with our dearmost friend. Because Krishna's already in love with us. He's just waiting for us to kind of like return his feelings, which is kind of like, whoa. The Lord is now waiting on us. The divine waits on us to return love. Amazing. Let us put that on our day as we go through it. Whether we are winding up our day, whether we're just starting our day. Remember, our divine dearmost friend is just waiting on you to return the love back. Amazing things. I look forward to what amazing journeys we're going to go on Friday. Mahabharata is one of my favorite epics. I can't wait to be in it with you all. I've been prepping for a while for this, so I'm really excited. And I'll see you all again next time. Same place. With that, Hare Krishna. See you soon. Thank you for being here.